everyone, and a very warm welcome to an extra special Winspiration webinar. As some of you already know, here at SILIP Scotland, the Winspiration series is dedicated to advancing feminist leadership in libraries, championing and celebrating the women who make up our amazing female majority sector. Today is a particularly exciting theme for us, and by participating, you are already playing your part in evidencing how libraries really have a unique role in supporting what, as information professionals, we might call menstrual literacy. So my name is Kirsten McQuarrie. I'm Membership Officer for SILIPS, so if you need anything throughout, please don't hesitate to just send me a message in the chat. Captions are enabled, you should be able to see them appearing at the bottom of your screen. And we'd appreciate it if you could please keep your mics muted for now so that we can hear our wonderful presentations until we reach the Q&A discussion, of course, at which point we would love to hear your voices. You are aware that the session is being recorded, so you're welcome to keep your cameras on or off, entirely your preference. Of course, it's always lovely to see everyone's faces, but if you're struggling with bandwidth at all, then we'd suggest popping it off. So I am thrilled today to be joined by Sharon Sweeney from the University of Dundee and by Alicia Page from Bloody Good Period. You might have noticed some bloody good resources on the period event Padlet, if I do say so myself, and Alicia will be illuminating them further for us as we come to our discussion. But first, I am delighted to introduce Sharon, who is very kindly joining us to share insights from the University of Dundee's pioneering period library. This is a creative, collaborative space that does wonderful work in tackling misinformation, reducing stigma, normalising menstrual education, and by upholding both information literacy and social justice. I know it's a project that libraries of all sectors can take great inspiration from. So Sharon, thank you so much for being here. I can see the slides getting ready. Whenever you're ready, the virtual floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirsten, and it's a delight to be with you all this morning. I like having a bloody good conversation, and it's nice to say bloody without getting a row. So, can you all see my slides?
Looks fantastic now. Thank you, Sharon.
There we are. There we are. So, as Kirsten said, I work at the University of Dundee. I'm not a librarian. I am actually the student funding officer, but I have the lead for the provision of free sanitary products at the university. You will be aware that a pilot from the Scottish Government, which started in Aberdeen, has now gone through legislation and is law in all public buildings, which is excellent. But actually, when the pilot was taking place in Aberdeen, I spoke to our then student president and said we should do this. So we negotiated with the university. They paid for items to be purchased through the student union shop, and we made, it was about maybe 6 months worth of free products available to students before the money started coming in from the Scottish Government. So, I am here today to talk about our period library. Okay, so the approach that we have, so I'm a community educator to trade. So I always adopt the community development approach in whatever I do in practice. And that's really about working with people where they're at. So in addition to providing products, because that's actually quite easy, once you get everything in place, you could actually just keep letting it go and just press approve on the purchasing system, but that's not how I wanted to do it. So I wanted to do it about education, awareness and understanding. And we were looking at the term period positive, and that has developed somewhat since. So this is just a picture of some of the books that we have in the library, looking at menstruation from various perspectives. So we've got period power, social justice, because it's a massive social justice issue. And we like this book because it does talk about menstrual justice. I was looking at Roman and Greek goddesses of vaginas, and coming up with some pretty explicit stuff online this morning. So I chose not to share that in the presentation because that's not what we're here for. But I think it's important to just talk about things as they are. You know, people who menstruate will have a vagina, they will have a uterus. So let's just start using these words, break the stigma. And I would hope as we work together with that feminist approach, everyone will become more educated and aware, and everyone knows someone who menstruates, whether you menstruate or not. And then again, going back to period power, looking at the menstrual movement, very good hand descriptions there. So we have about 22 books covering a variety of period, menstrual issues or stages in one's menstrual journey. So we have some books that talk mainly for parents or carers or interested family members about how you start to have these conversations with young people. I know Hey Girls did some work with single fathers to help them approach that conversation about, you know, what do you need, what do I do, how do I have that conversation with my daughter, she doesn't want to talk about it, she's not got her mum around, these kind of things. So this is exactly like family literacy. So again, I'm looking at that family learning from a community perspective, but it's essential within the, you know, the context of libraries, you know, because without libraries, how do we learn? You know, the internet's great, but books are good. And then going through, you know, maybe like, you know, getting to understand your cycle, understand your body, because a lot of people don't know what all their bits are inside. I say bits because I'm not an anatomist and I don't want to get it wrong, even though I've got them all. So it's about just grabbing that power. You know that expression when, you know, it was quite a male term about, you know, oh, get some balls. Now, I can't remember, was it Betty White had said, what's the point of using that term because women have vaginas and they're much stronger than balls? And I thought, I like that, you know, because, you know, grasp our power, we always kind of like look at our core, and that's where our, you know, if you still have a uterus, obviously, you know, that's where our power actually sits. So let's embrace it. Let's, you know, draw from that, even in the most painful of days. And then we get to the wonderful stage in life about the menopause, or the schmenopause, as I like to call it. And again, you know, menopause is spoken about a lot more in the past few years since was it Mariella Fostrup and Big Brother woman, what's her name?
Oh, Davina McCall.
Yes, thank you, Davina McCall. I could see her face. You know, they did some documentaries which were excellent, and, you know, again, literacy, learning, you know, they were very impactful. So we want to support our learners at the university in the best way possible so that they don't have to go up and say, where's the menopause books, or I need to speak to my child. So there's about 22 books. The University of Dundee has 4 libraries, 2 on main campus, so the main library and the library at the Art College. We have 1 in our medical school, and we have 1 over in Kirkcaldy where many of our nursing students learn. So we've launched it, but we need to kind of revisit it year after year. So there is a very good resource in the library. Now, in terms of literacy, I just wanted to show you some photographs that have come out rather pixelated, unfortunately. So this is some engagement we did during our National Student Money Week. The focus was about the cost of living, how can we encourage people to spend less money, particularly on utilities. So the picture on the left is my colleague who's dressed up as Penny, our mascot, so Penny the pig, piggy banks, that kind of thing. And then Penny is standing with my colleague Vicky, who did work in our HR department till recently, and she is the regional ambassador for Endometriosis Scotland. And at that 3-day event, she had about 3 students who went to speak to her, and they were all encouraged to go and see their GP, because endometriosis is something that people don't necessarily understand. And what Vicky has in her hand in the middle picture is we were using cut off trouser legs to make draft excluders. And I don't have a picture of it, but we had a random pink leg, trouser leg. So we decided to make that into a tampon. And we used all the different coloured pens to get all the different colours, or as many colours as we could. So so again, this is just to demonstrate that kind of engagement and wider learning. And then on the right, we have so the young woman with the blonde hair. That's Ailsa. She was our community education intern student last academic year, with Julia from Unicorn Cups. Julia started this company herself. The picture's not up to promote her cups in particular, but they are made with medical grade silicone. There's 2 different sizes, and that's, which I didn't know, it depends how high your uterus sits in your body. I didn't know there was a difference. And that might be why some people find certain internal items painful or difficult. So so it does save money, and they were literally flying off the table. But we had a lot of women from Southeast Asia and West Africa coming to engage with us, and some of them hadn't seen tampons before.
Thank you.
So we were taking the tampon apart and explaining it all, and then they were saying, well, where does it go? So we're like, okay. So Ailsa very quickly kind of used her fingers to show, you know, how it would work. So much wider learning than I was anticipating, and then we were directing people to the library. So collaboration and development. We work very closely with the Preventing Period Poverty Society. Most of the students there are medical students, and they're super engaged, and they've got access to people for doing talks in their society. I've been speaking with the chaplain about using some of their space for a menstrual cafe for anyone who menstruates, and I purposely use the term anyone who menstruates because we need to be fully inclusive in what we do, and it has to be a safe space for people who menstruate. Looking at sexual health and education, and I don't know if my colleague Kirsty has managed to join the call, but our Directorate of People, as it's now called, are looking to develop strategies for staff as well. So Kirsty and I are going to be meeting soon, and also I have made Kirsty aware of the Bloody Good Employer as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. So I've got a wee hold the press with some links to coverage that we have had. And one of the third one down, the eauc.org.uk, I participated in research that they were doing around the sustainability goals, the UN sustainability goals, and how we are meeting them. And that was the very early stage. I think that was in the first year. And we were absolutely smashing it out the park, and we are doing more so because of the Scottish Government wanting to be carbon neutral by was it 2030. So that's just to give you a flavour after this about what we do and how we do it. And then the last link there, talking about being inclusive. So this is always an iterative process. You know, learning is action. Learning is love. Learning is not passive. I don't believe in the banking model of learning. You know, we want to engage with people and direct them to the library so they can do their own searches, find out what they need. But one of the things that we did, and I'm very pleased to say without any pushback at all, I asked for products to be put in the toilets that are labelled male toilets, and without any hesitation, that was done as well. So whether a cisgendered man takes them away for their cisgendered girlfriend or whatever, I just wanted to make sure anyone who goes into the main bathrooms in the university, should they need it, can access free single-use products. So I've got my contact details there. I will, it's been recorded anyway, so I don't have to send Kirsten the presentation. So I think that really is my introduction, because I would like to keep some of maybe the more granular aspects to Q&A, if that's okay with you, Kirsten. But we're very proud at the university of having our period libraries, and I think it was a bloody good idea.
Bloody well said, Sharon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You definitely should be proud. Well, it's such a kind of tour de force as a project in terms of the collaboration, the different strands of the university that it's brought together, and the student community and the staff community. It's such a fantastic case study, and I love that. Without libraries, how do we learn? Oh, is this a wee canine companion as well?
Oh, this is my recently dearly departed dog.
Oh goodness. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, what a gorgeous dog they are. Oh,
well, he was 13, so I can't complain.
Oh, that's a great age. Yeah, we love pets of Phillips here, don't we? As our regulars will know. So, that's a beautiful photo. And I think the kind of thought you brought into the intersectionality of the period library is incredible and so inspirational, and also the sustainability. So people might know that we at Phillips, we have a Phillips Go Green, which is fed into Green Libraries UK wide. And you know, just while people are thinking of their questions, actually, that was something in my mind. It sounds as if this work has aligned very well with the kind of university's broader impetus towards sustainable practices. Were you seeing that in terms of, because libraries are often kind of we were the first recyclers, that principle is kind of in with the bricks with us, in terms of the products that people were using as well? Is there a kind of real interest in sustainability there too?
Absolutely. We moved to reuse, well, we started off, I insisted, so we bought an initial bulk of single-use items. Then I stipulated that they all had to be, as a minimum, 100% organic cotton. And we were talking about toxic shock syndrome. Then there's a company in Dundee that were making boxer-style shorts that had the cotton inserts so that you could attach a pad to it. So I bought a whole load of them, and you know, trans and non-binary students were saying, this is amazing, you know, I've wanted these for years and I couldn't afford them. And I was saying, I will take two. I mean, they were very expensive, but you know, it's the Scottish Government money, and I thought it's a wise use of money, because it's, you know, in terms of like the carbon neutral of the aspect, you know, it was a company in Dundee, they were using good quality cotton, so you know, that was really kind of pulling that together. Alicia, the brand is called Wild Mode, and it's wild with an E at the end, but there are a few people that do it now as well. Then we moved to reusable pads, day pads, night pads. Again, students love them. And we also bought period pants. Students love them. Love them. And again, over the years, we've bought them in different shapes. You know, I wouldn't really buy bikini ones because, you know, I don't know about anybody else, but when your period pants are usually kind of your bigger, comfier pants.
Yeah, we're in Bridget Jones mode by that point, aren't we? I wouldn't go for bikini ones either.
Well, actually, in the first year, I bought lots of multi-packs of cotton pants out at Marks and Spencer's to give students their period pants. And we also bought boxers as well. We've learned that quite a lot of women like to use boxers at night, or when they're feeling really bloated. So I thought, well, that's quite intersectional. So that was something new to me because I'm past all that now, thankfully. So yeah, we're buying kind of, and there was a company, I can't remember what they were called, but they had, it was like a bra strap at the side, so it would go over your hips, and then it was to enable, as you were getting bloated at the start of your period, you could loosen off the strap so that you're still wearing the same they were period pants, but they were moving with you as your body was changing, which was really good. So we try and keep an eye out and try something new. So if anybody wants to know, I can get a list of some of our suppliers, because they're all through the Scottish procurement system anyway. And I can share it with Kirsten, and you know, you can have a look at that if you like. But it's been very successful. Very successful.
Absolutely, thank you. I think we're all going to be noting down links there. We'll add them to the Padlet, because I think, yeah, personally and professionally, people have great interest. And I mean, they sound like they would actually suit sort of early pregnancy as well, those ones that you're describing. So there's so much out there that just is very often we're not encountering day to day. Yeah. I was actually going to ask a question as well about the book collection itself, because 22 is a wonderful number, in fact, because I think when we think back to our own library collections, you think, could we, you know, I'd be very surprised if kind of acquisitions over the years has resulted in that many. Are they mostly quite new titles? Is this an emerging trend in kind of in non-fiction and or literature more generally, or is there actually kind of period positive literature that has gone under the radar for past decades?
I don't know if it's gone under the radar for the past decades, but some of the books were older than I thought they might be. But essentially, I had a member of staff who basically sat for days and went through the internet and library resources and things to source books, and then we were able to just provide a list. So she was very good at identifying books with various themes. I can speak to my colleague in the library and ask her if she still has the list, or if I can find the list, and I can share it with you as well. So yeah, the photograph on the Padlet, that was, as you enter the library, there's big glass cabinets, and we were given a whole section of a cabinet for a month to show all the different books. And then again, pick it, you know, as one would, look at the references in some of the books and then pick them up and then see what else you can find, just like doing standard research, really.
Lovely. That's music to a librarian's ears, hearing that, the further references. Oh, thank you. And actually, the titles that you did share there, it's amazing how social justice intersects with menstrual justice, and to really make that explicit, so valuable for the university community and community at large. Yep. Thank you. Does anybody else have a question for Sharon? I don't know if any have come through in the Padlet yet, but we're a small group, so please do pop it in the chat, or even just raise your hand, come off mute. We'd love to hear from you, or of course you can follow up afterwards. We do like to get into that granular operational level, because there's a lot of inspiration here. Don't see any questions coming in at the moment, but we'll give it a moment, yeah, and I'll keep an eye on the Padlet. But for the time being, Sharon, thank you so much for that absolute whistle-stop tour through the period library. And I think we all just want to visit now and stock up and borrow the books. It's such an incredible project and it continues to go from strength to strength, clearly. And I think from one bloody good idea to another, because we're so delighted to also be joined by you, Alicia. People will know that since this event was set up, I had put the Bloody Good research report up there, which I believe dates from maybe 2021, early 2022. Lo and behold, when I went back into it this week, I discovered that there's now a Bloody Good Employers programme as well. And it's this programme that Alicia has joined us to kindly share a few details about. Oh, sorry, there's a question from Beth about the stock list that we can share. Yeah, absolutely. So I can work with Sharon and we'll make sure that we get that round attendees. Yeah, thank you. But yeah, Alicia, this might be a good moment. I could hand over to you and you could introduce us to, like, libraries are, of course, already bloody good employers, but how we make that official. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. No, thanks so much for inviting me, and it's great to hear to be able to have the opportunity to hear about all of that work, Sharon. It's really great stuff and really strong alignment with lots of our values and the way that we talk about things and the way that we like to implement things. So I was actually just messaging one of my colleagues who that you were on their radar because I think they would absolutely love all of that. So yeah, I'm here to talk a bit about Bloody Good Employers and the work that we do. But I guess for a little bit of context first, to explain who we are. So Bloody Good Employers is a social enterprise, and we are connected to the charity Bloody Good Period. So we were founded out of the charity Bloody Good Period. And as a charity, we've been around for 7 years. And the work that we do is getting period products and education to refugees, asylum seekers, and people who use services like food banks across the UK. So that's kind of the core operational work that we do as a charity. But then alongside that, there's the contribution that we've had in terms of changing the narrative around menstrual health and periods, all of that stuff around that Sharon was talking around inclusive language, around removing stigma and shame, and really helping have those conversations on kind of a mass scale. And pumping that into our activism. So we've got a campaign running at the moment called the Period Penalty, where we've had great early engagement from MPs, where we're really trying to, as well as the work that we're doing kind of on the ground, to really try and influence change at a governmental level as well. And we would obviously love for free products for everybody. And I think, just feel great to be. I always love speaking with people from Scotland, and I think particularly as a group of libraries, I think it's really amazing that and really inspiring and reassuring in terms of the role that you play in the community and in being spaces for people to have access to that support and menstrual literacy, as you said. So yeah, that's a bit about us as a charity. Then Bloody Good Employers exists for 2 key reasons. So really to further the work that we've done from a thinking perspective and an impact perspective into workplaces. So Kirsten, you mentioned the research that we did, and that was really our kind of first. We knew that people were struggling with their menstrual health at work, and that workplaces weren't supportive and inclusive environments. But we did some research to actually look into that a bit more. And I know you've got the links to the report, so please do have a look at that. But as some key headlines, some of our key findings were that 89% of people had experienced stress or anxiety around their period at work. And in the work that we're actually doing now, we're seeing that is similar still around that figure. But the underlying reasons for that can really vary. As we know, people work in very different contexts. So the workplace is a very broad landscape. So the underlying reasons for that stress and anxiety could vary from more like common or more common examples of experiencing pain and cramps, or feeling the need to hide the fact that you're menstruating at work because you're not able to talk to your manager about it. We consistently see that there are people who take annual leave to deal with their menstrual health because they don't have the support in place to be able to ask for regular time off, and they don't want to be seen as being kind of unreliable. So they're using that kind of precious holiday time to deal with their menstrual health because their workplace doesn't have a flexible environment. And then on an extreme end, just looking at organizational working practices, things like people not having the time they need to take for breaks and toilet breaks when they're menstruating. And actually, it's been really enlightening to see that feedback has continued through the work that we've done, even in settings where it wasn't expected. So in places where there aren't these kind of rigid work patterns, but actually from a cultural perspective, going for breaks and being late for meetings is not really accepted. So there's still that kind of strong element there culturally, even if it's not part of an official kind of working practice. And then the other reason that we exist as a social enterprise is the work that we do with employers is paid for, and that money that we make, the profit that we make, is then donated back to support the work that we do as a charity, which many charities are doing now, because as the demand for services like ours is increasing, it's also more challenging to get funding. So lots of charities are thinking about how they can utilize the skills and the knowledge within the team to kind of bring that income in to support the core work. So that's who we are and what we do. And in terms of the actual, or that's who we are, sorry, what we do at Bloody Good Employers is we have kind of one key offering, which is our Bloody Good Employers accreditation program. So this is where we work with employers. The timeline's flexible, so we could work with you over 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months. 12 months seems to be kind of the most popular, and that is where we're working with you essentially through an accreditation process. And it's a change management program to review and improve your policies, your comms, and your culture around menstrual inclusion at work, and that also includes a focus on menopause. So we've been running for nearly 2 years now, and we've got 17 employers signed up to the program. So they really vary in terms of context. So we've got small charities like Copperfield, the breast cancer charity. We're our first accredited Bloody Good employer. And then kind of on the opposite end of that, we've got Network Rail, who are our biggest partner, 40,000 staff members who are working in offices, out on tracks, really different contexts. We also work with parts of the NHS as well. And from kind of a local borough council, we have a few of the London Borough Councils signed up, who I think very similar to the role that libraries can play in the community, are working with us to improve their support for their staff, but also taking those learnings and thinking about how that can be applied to the community and the people that they work with in their local area. So in terms of how our program works, we do an evaluation. So we do a staff survey, we evaluate your working practices and policies. Everybody's invited to complete the survey, regardless of gender, regardless of whether they menstruate or experience menopause or not. And that's really to make sure that, and to kind of set the tone that this is work for everybody to be doing and to be involved in terms of creating an inclusive environment. And then once we've done that, we have a really good starting point for kind of strengths improvement areas at the beginning of the program. Then we work with you through a series of workshops, so change management workshops, where you'll work with us to formalise your action plan for change. And then towards the end of the programme, you're then implementing that change with our support and kind of getting ready for your accreditation. So at a high level, that's how it works. But we also offer taster sessions, which is a one-off workshop that we can deliver to give you a taster of the work, but also they work really well as one-off sessions that you could do around particular days within the year, where you're focusing on this topic. And we also offer a fast track option, which, like you said, given the work that you've done already, you might be suitable candidates for that, where we do an evaluation and then you can work with us towards your accreditation. So it's kind of a more lighter touch option. And what I will say, particularly for groups where there's only a small number of employees, there is an opportunity to kind of group together as well and work through the accreditation as one group, with your own kind of focuses and nuances. So, you know, we're really young, so really open to conversations around that. If you felt like the whole program was quite a lot for you to do as a small group, then there are those options as well to combine. And yeah, I think that's everything. Did I miss anything that you wanted me to say?
No, that was absolutely amazing, so comprehensive, and it's just, I mean, congratulations to you all. It's just such necessary work, and you guys are just absolutely leading the way with stuff that needs to happen. Historically, it should have always been there, and you know, it's transformative to see it in place. There's so much I've noted down here. I have got as well, kind of going through one group, could there be a SILIPS community? You know, bloody good SILIPS, which you all agree is already the case. I'm actually wondering, because we've obviously discussed that we have librarians from all different sectors here. Is it something that schools are in a kind of for young people, that people working with youngsters could get involved with as well, or is it at the moment, is it only kind of adult organisations?
Yeah, really good question. So we, as a charity, our focus group is adults. There are lots of great organisations that are working with young people. The work camp is for employers essentially, and for employees. So the work can definitely be delivered with that focus. There is then the opportunity, I guess, to then take those learnings into your own environment, but we don't deliver specifically to children and young people.
Yeah, but there's obviously a lot of scope there for, in a community like ours, for sharing the learning, and yeah, absolutely, it'd be nice for that generation coming up to have such a radically different understanding of menstruation from the get-go. One of the things that really struck me, and I've put the full report, it's on the Padlet and it's in the chat as well, because it's definitely is well worth the read. I mean, it's quite sobering research in many places, but really, really valuable to understand. One of the things that we're often interested in libraries is looking at a kind of wider sector context, quite often international, sort of where, you know, where the greatest successes are around the world. And I know that some countries have brought in things like menstrual leave, and are there kind of places around the globe that are leading the way, would you say? Or where does the UK compare at the moment?
I think it's really interesting and very, very nuanced. So our focus is very much UK. So I don't know everything about the rest of the world, but I can speak to things that I do know. So one is, I think what's been really interesting in the UK is that we have seen this kind of focus or popularization of menopause, which has really kind of taken the headlines, and particularly in the employment space. Most employers I speak with have done some work, or it is a top priority for them to focus on menopause, which is absolutely brilliant, and it really helps open the door for further conversations around menstrual health and periods. But then there is also kind of a really interesting, I guess, like power dynamic element to that, wherein as our boards and senior leaders are getting more diverse from a gender perspective, we're able to focus on menopause, as it's more likely that people at that level will be experiencing. So it's coming from that kind of first-hand experience. And then there's kind of the element of menstruation still being seen as something that we just get on with, in the background, and not something that's talked about. So comparing that with my understanding of organisations who do similar work, it's actually been the opposite, actually, that menopause hasn't taken that limelight and had that attention. And so I think it's really interesting culturally. The Davina effect has been massive and really, really positive. But it's just really interesting to see how that has really meant that menopause has taken the focus in the UK, but that's not the case elsewhere. So that's one bit. And then the second bit in terms of policy. So there are a number of countries, Spain most recently, who have introduced menstrual leave, and there have been calls to introduce menstrual leave here in the UK. Our stance on that at Bloody Good Period is quite nuanced. So essentially, we absolutely advocate for the concept of people taking leave for their working being really important in that. We're really also aware of the risks of further discrimination with bringing in something like menstrual leave and the kind of plaster fix that comes with that. It's okay, well, that's sorted now because we have menstrual leave. When in fact, actually, there's a lot to be said for making workplaces more inclusive and more accommodating rather than calling people out. Let's make the space more inclusive for them. But absolutely, if you need leave around your period, then we advocate for people being able to take it. But it's not the single solution that we would really advocate for. So yeah, a couple of bits in there.
Wow, it's fascinating. Thank you. That nuance is so important. And I think it complements what Sharon shared earlier about the kind of intersectionality of this work. I hadn't really realised that in terms of age, but of course, within the workplace and power dynamics, I mean, I guess there's class dynamics there as well. It's so interesting. And I get the sense that your work is really grounded in, it parallels to me just listening to almost the social model of disability as well, that the problem, is when we think of accessibility in the widest possible terms, the problem is with the landscape we're forced to inhabit. It's not with the people who are inhabiting that landscape, and making sure that that message is front and centre. So, wow, it's fascinating and so valuable. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Alicia? Please do pop them in the chat. Just raise your hand, come off mute. I will delve into the Padlet. We've shared lots of links, and I'll make sure that they're in the follow-up email as well. I think the University of Dundee feel like they could, I think, have a look at that fast track. Perhaps they've done a lot of fantastic work already. Yeah, Sharon, go ahead.
Thank you, Lisa. That was really interesting. I just wanted to pick up that final point about the social model of disability. So another hat that I've worn in the past is, so I'm an active trade unionist and quite an experienced trade unionist, and spent many years as a member of the STUC Disabled Workers Committee, because I am a disabled worker. And we had a bit of a intersectional conversation with the Women's Committee around menstrual leave, menopause, all that kind of thing. And I had made a comment, I can't remember exactly what the comment was, but the feedback was that menstruation, menopause isn't a disability. And I had said, well, I agree. However, one can acquire a disability through menopause in particular, but also during menstruation. So we mentioned endometriosis earlier, we're probably quite familiar about PCOS. So either of those two conditions are debilitating and would meet the protected characteristic of disability. So it is essential that we always look to the social model of disability, in my view, because it is it's a class war. So anyway, it was just to say that we need to look at that intersectionality space where disabled people can share the same experiences as those who menstruate, and those who menstruate may acquire a disability, not just endometriosis or PCOS. So it's a very interesting space. I don't know how much research is done in that area. I haven't looked into it, but it might be something quite interesting to find out. Thanks. But I'm sure we will be in touch, Lisa.
Fantastic. It's such a good point, Sharon. Really, really interesting conversations, and not before time that we kind of, the employers and workplaces and actually the culture at large very much need to have. So yeah, thank you. Any other questions before we kind of draw to a close? There's been a lot. Oh yeah, Cassie, go ahead. Thank you.
I'm not quite sure how to phrase this, so bear with me. So endometriosis is notoriously difficult to get a diagnosis for, and there seems to be the classic gap in medical knowledge, and in terms of going to the GP and stuff with this kind of issue, it's the sort of thing that you're looking at many years and many different GP appointments and many different referrals and stuff. How does that then reflect on things like making a workplace or an employer more friendly? And like endometriosis can be seen as a disability, but if you can't get a diagnosis for it, then how do you then fight for that as a how do you make that fair, that those who are struggling to get a diagnosis or are struggling with their periods but don't have endometriosis but can't get a different diagnosis, how do you kind of level that playing field?
Really, really interesting question. Go ahead, Sharon.
I don't have an exact answer for you, Cassie, but my suggestion would be, and I say this as someone who thought they had endometriosis, told that I didn't, and then maybe 6-7 years ago, after a scan, I was told, oh, you've had endometriosis. So I lived with endometriosis for probably 10 to 15 years without knowing, and without having any other final conversations about endo. So my suggestion in that situation would be that if the GP was willing to write a letter to the employer or the occupational health professional to say that this person is living with like a working diagnosis of endometriosis, which, so as far as the doctor's concerned, they are most likely to have endometriosis. Their symptoms are X, Y, and Z, for which A, B, and C within the workplace would be helpful. So that way, I agree, formally, they won't meet the protected characteristic of disability, but if the employer is forward thinking or could be pushed that way, then at least if they can, there's evidence to say this person's lived experience and will need these kind of adjustment support. So I think it's just manipulating the cracks to help. It might not change the workplace overnight, but even if the employer is more understanding of what they're living with, I think that would be a good place to start. Sorry, that was a bit of a trade union response, but here you go.
No, well, personally, I found that so helpful. Alicia, did you want to come in as well?
Nothing. Yeah, I don't have a really specific answer, but just to talk about something that you said at the end there, Sharon, in terms of helping people understand what people are living with. The work that we do through our programme, a big part of that is around myth busting. The variation of experiences that come with, we talk about the average 28-day cycle. It's not a helpful way to be talking about the experiences that people have. And so through our work, we're really educating employers with the employers who join the programme. This is where you think we're talking about something really specific, which is periods, but actually oftentimes once they get towards the end of the programme and they're looking at making their policies inclusive of menstrual health considerations, it extends far beyond that, and they're actually looking at, right, what do we need to do to update all of our policies to be inclusive of lots of other considerations? So yeah, I don't have a direct answer for you, unfortunately. Yeah, a lot of the work around menstrual health is aimed at individuals who have menstrual health, and actually there's a lot of power to be, or a lot of impact to be had in doing it at that change management institutional level, but it's hard to get people to buy into that because there's lots of other considerations. But I think that's really where the change, both areas is where the change comes, but I think that institutional change is really important in that.
Absolutely. And the only thing that I would add, Cassie, is firstly, thank you for asking the question, because it's so important. I think really highlights the misogyny that is in medicine, that has historically been there. And it's not been in a vacuum. It's been a facet of women's oppression. And actually, I feel when Alicia mentions myth busting there, this is a key role that libraries can assume as well when we're looking at our remit for social justice, our remit for information literacy. Part of that story is, I think, telling the truth in all its facets and making sure that people do know that, yes, you are disproportionately, you're not as likely to be heard, you're not as likely to be taken seriously. And of course, there's intersections within that. But actually having the library as a space where these stories can be held, preserved, even if we can be asking the questions, even if we don't have the answers, then there's value, there's advocacy in that hopefully, that people can take back to their GP, take back to their employers, and slowly but surely that very, very necessary cultural change is going to happen. Does that answer it, Cassie? Does that give us some room to?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, I wish we did have
a bigger societal thing, but at least we can do something to prod it in the right direction.
Too long didn't read Revolution. Is that where we're at? Yeah, okay, that's what I heard. Sharon's nodding. Love it. Does anyone else have a question just before? We've just got a few minutes left, but if anyone does have a final question, or Sharon and Alicia have both kindly shared their contact details, so if you do want to follow up, I know that in our respective organisations and our respective libraries, there's going to be all different sorts of facets of this work taking place. So if you do want to follow up, then please do. But do we have a final question, or I think we're looking like okay? Let me just dip quickly into our Padlet. That will stay on the Winspiration page. So, and I'll add more resources as we get them, so you can continually refer to that. And our recording of today, which has been a wonderfully lively one, a bloody good recording. We'll just get one swear in before we're done. Oh, thank you, Sally. Thank you so much for joining us. I think if we don't have any, Alicia, Beth, fantastic. Thank you for that question. Let me just open it. How would you deal with backlash from period products being provided in the male toilets? So yeah, that's for Alicia, but I think, Sharon, it was also at the university, and if I remember correctly, there wasn't backlash. It was kind of anticipated, but fortunately didn't come.
Yep, that's correct. No backlash at all. It was quite fabulous, actually.
Yeah, so in terms of the employers that we work with on the programme, I'm not aware of any backlash of it having of them having been implemented, but it is a question that people ask. So I think it's interesting that we can expect backlash from that in itself is quite interesting. And just to draw some insight into one of the questions that we ask in our surveys, which is around how comfortable people feel talking about their period with their colleagues or in front of their colleagues. Lots of people who menstruate usually say they don't feel comfortable. When asked why, it's because one of the most popular answers is because they don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable. Yet for the people who complete the survey who don't menstruate, oftentimes they say they do feel comfortable talking about menstruation at work or with colleagues. So one of the things that we talk about in our workshops is how it creates this cycle of silence with these assumptions that we don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable, so we back off, and then those people don't feel like they can initiate conversation, so there's just this silence and that conversation's never had. But what we advocate for with implementing products in male toilets is there has to be clear comms from leadership around implementing products. So if we're just implementing products and one day they're just there, then it leaves more space for like justifications for doing that or questions around that. So we do actually have a product provision guide which I can share, which goes through the things to consider when you're implementing products. So it's that strong communication. We are implementing period products in these spaces. Also in the bathrooms themselves, there's an opportunity to add some signage or education there too around why those products are there and what they're for. Yes, I guess that's more answering how to set it up in the first place rather than dealing with backlash. I guess the dealing with backlash is really contextual. So it would depend on, your own internal culture and your own like processes for doing those sorts of things. But I think that can be prevented by that kind of strong comms in the first place.
That's so helpful, Alicia. Thank you. Yeah, and as we always say with our ETI work, any backlash, send them to Phillips. We are here. We're here for you. We've got your back as well. Yeah, some great questions there. Thank you so much, everyone. We could continue this conversation for, I think, until the revolution happens, but I think probably people are ready for their lunch, so we might draw to a close just about now. But can everybody please join me in thanking Sharon and Alicia for joining us today? It's been an utterly fascinating discussion, such necessary work, such valuable work, and it accords so powerfully with the raison d'etre of libraries, with the role that we have in our communities and the unique part we have to play in upholding social justice and upholding equal access to information. So thank you so much to you both for joining us. With that, I think I will pop the recording off. We will make sure to share the recording, share the links, and please don't hesitate to get in touch with us if you have any follow-up questions. I think some bloody good work is going to take place before too long. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I'm going to quickly pop an evaluation link in the chat. So if you would like to share your thoughts, this will kind of shape the future of Winspiration, future of Phillips online learnings more broadly. We'd really, really appreciate that. And yes, I put earlier that we do have a Talking Menopause toolkit online learning coming up next month as well, so make sure that you're signed up for that too. But for now, thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you for joining us, Alicia. Take care, everyone, and yeah, we'll see you at an online learning again soon. Thank you.